Join us on an unforgettable journey. Hit subscribe and be part of the adventure. The Galactic Orphan Registry labeled him. Subject 7B. No name. No origin. Just a classification and a file marked with a single word, rejected. Born from a failed xenogenetic experiment on a blacklisted biotech moon, he was retrieved during a coalition raid. His mother, a bioengineered hybrid, had died during containment. There was no trace of a father. Just the infant, curled in synthetic membranes, crying in silence. Most beings cried with sound. This one didn't. It emitted a low-frequency pulse that gave nearby species migraines. Its limbs were asymmetrical, one arm thicker than the other. Its skin mottled between scales and translucent patches. One of its eyes was opaque and slow to move. It blinked out of rhythm. When it tried to smile, no one smiled back. The Galactic Care Initiative determined he was neurologically incompatible with standard species bonding. That meant no foster system would take him. Too alien. Too ugly. Too strange. Over the months, the orphan ward on New Vega Outpost became colder, quieter, emptier, except for the corner where he lay in reinforced isolation. The staff fed him, but no one held him. Droids changed his wrappings. He reached out for connection and touched only metal. He tried to copy sounds he heard in the halls, but his speech was slow, uncertain, filled with distortion. He learned to stop trying. He curled up. He waited. Years passed. Then one day, a new form crossed the station's registry logs. Jonathan Hale, civilian visitor. Human male. Earthborn. Former military engineer. Recently transferred to the Terran Diplomatic Corps for interspecies reconstruction projects. Age 52. Widower. No dependents. Assigned temporary housing on Vega for 5 months. The station clerk offered him a visitor tour of the hydrodomes, but he declined. "I'd rather see the community side of things," he said. So they brought him to the education district, the trade alleys, and finally, because he asked, the orphan ward. The nurse hesitated. "There's one child here. But he's not what you'd expect." Jonathan stepped inside. Rows of empty bassinets. Sterile lighting. At the far end, sealed behind transparent shielding, a figure sat. Small but misshapen. Watching with a single alert eye. Its breathing was uneven. One hand twitched against the floor like it was counting time. Jonathan approached the glass. The infant didn't hide. It stood. Slowly, trembling, it stood. Then it placed its strange hand on the glass. Jonathan stared. "I've never seen one like that," the nurse offered nervously. Jonathan didn't reply. The infant tried to smile. A crooked, strange thing. Its lip pulled too far on one side. Its teeth were irregular. But it was a smile. Jonathan pressed his hand to the glass. The infant mirrored him. He whispered, barely audible, "He reminds me of her." Later, they explained everything. The risks. The incompatibilities. The neurological concerns. The reputation damage. The political fallout. The alien status. The unfit classification. He said, "I know what I'm doing." They said, "He's not human." He said, "He's alone." The adoption papers took 3 weeks. During that time, Jonathan returned daily. He brought books. A red scarf. A music player from Earth. Every day, he talked to the child through the glass. Read to him. Played music. The child listened. On day 9, he attempted to hum back the tune. It was off-key, but it was unmistakably mimicry. By day 21, Jonathan had learned how to carry him without triggering the child's electric pulse response. The first time he lifted him, the infant reached for his beard and made a strange warbling sound. It almost sounded like, "Duh." They left the ward together. The nurse cried after they exited. She didn't know why. She barely remembered the child's file name. But something about the way Jonathan had held him, carefully, like he mattered, made her cry. The station announced the adoption formally. The announcement received little attention from the council. Human curiosity, they said. Probably temporary. A sympathy gesture. He'll return the creature when it gets inconvenient. Jonathan named him Ian. Because no one's going to throw you away. Not now. Not ever. Back in his living quarters, Jonathan set up a hybrid oxygen habitat. He adjusted gravity tolerances and sleeping zones. Ian didn't understand everything, but he followed Jonathan's voice. Reacted to touch. Sometimes shivered at loud sounds. Sometimes made low keening noises while sleeping. Jonathan started to recognize patterns. When Ian cried, the temperature dropped. When he was afraid, small magnetic pulses flickered across nearby metal. When he was happy, everything felt calm. Not just emotionally, but physically. Jonathan's own migraines had vanished. His sleep was easier. He asked one of the medtechs to scan him. You're being affected by the kid's field, they said. Might not be dangerous. Could be stabilizing your nervous system. Or just psychosomatic. Jonathan didn't care. It felt like peace. Sometimes, he'd catch Ian looking at him. Not with infant blankness, but with something deeper. Like he was studying the lines of Jonathan's face, trying to commit them to memory. Jonathan had lost a daughter years ago. She had been 8. Curly hair. Big smile. She liked to draw. Her last sketch was of a starship hugging a moon. He kept it in his pocket still. One night, while putting Ian to sleep, Jonathan whispered, "She would have liked you." Ian didn't reply. But he placed one crooked hand on Jonathan's arm and stayed there until sleep took him. The first word came 2 months later. Jonathan was preparing food when he heard it. A warbling syllable. Then again. Clearer. Duh. He turned. Ian was pointing at him. Dad. Jonathan couldn't speak. He knelt. Hugged him. Held him so close it hurt. Ian trembled in his arms, but didn't pull away. Later that night, he sat by the window. Watched the stars drift beyond the station. He didn't know what he had brought into his life. Didn't know what challenges would come. But he knew one thing. That child, ugly or not, malformed or not, unwanted or not, *** was his. ***. And he would fight anyone, anything, any law or war or galaxy, to protect him. Ian's development was unpredictable. His biology defied standard growth charts, and his behavior didn't fit any known patterns. His limbs stretched unevenly, his posture remained hunched, and his vocal cords produced a resonance that triggered anxiety in most living beings. But he learned. Jonathan taught him words, simple math, spatial games, and Earth-based stories. Ian absorbed them, slowly at first, then with uncanny acceleration. His brain processed differently, multisensory layers interweaving language with electromagnetic signals. He didn't just listen. He felt sound, saw emotion, and read intention. The coalition flagged the adoption for biological review. An agent from the Xenogenetic Oversight Division requested a behavioral audit. Jonathan didn't argue. He welcomed them into his quarters, let them observe routines, documented everything. Ian, when they arrived, froze. He remembered sterile gloves and harsh lights. His pulses spiked, readings hit unstable frequencies, and objects in the room began vibrating. The agent retreated, shaken. "The child is dangerous," they said. "He's traumatized," Jonathan replied. "So was I once." After that, they left them alone, for a while. Jonathan submitted weekly progress reports. He logged every improvement, every strange anomaly, and every hint of emotional bonding. Ian was tactile sensitive. He disliked bright lights. He drew obsessively, fractals, planetary systems, symmetrical patterns and chaotic loops. When he smiled, it was still crooked, but now filled with familiarity. His first drawing of Jonathan was rough and jagged, but the eyes were exact. He'd captured sadness behind the smile. The local school denied Ian access. Not for lack of intelligence, but due to interference risks. His presence disrupted digital interfaces. Audio equipment shorted out when he was upset. Some children mocked him when they passed by his window. Ian watched, silent. His eye followed them. He didn't cry. He never did. But the room's temperature dropped noticeably when they jeered. Jonathan didn't push for enrollment. Instead, he built a custom education module with adaptive neurofeedback. Ian thrived under it. He asked about Earth, about oceans, about what dogs smelled like. Jonathan showed him videos. Ian watched them hundreds of times. He mimicked barking. Laughed, though it sounded like metal scraping against static. One night, Jonathan found him sitting on the floor, surrounded by screens showing Earth forests. He asked, "Do you want to go there someday?" Ian didn't answer directly. He pointed at a tree, then at his own hand. "Like this?" Jonathan shook his head. "You don't need to be anything else." That statement would be tested. 3 months into the adoption, an incident occurred on Deck 7. A malfunction in the station's power node led to a cascading failure across life support systems. The emergency AI rerouted functions, but a group of civilians were trapped behind a pressure-sealed bay. Jonathan, monitoring alerts from his workshop, saw the news. He moved to respond, then stopped. Ian was already there. He had slipped out unnoticed, drawn by the surge in electromagnetic pulses. The rescue crew later described what they saw: a small, misshapen child placing both hands on the sealed bay door. The metal began to glow faintly. Seconds later, the lock system reinitialized, without power. The door opened. The trapped families were pulled to safety. Security detained Ian for unauthorized access and biological manipulation of restricted tech. Jonathan arrived, furious. He demanded oversight and legal counsel. "He's 6, he said. "He doesn't even understand what he is." The commander replied coldly. "Exactly our concern." A tribunal convened. Scientists debated. Ethicists submitted reports. Theories emerged. Ian was not just a bioengineered organism. He might be a new evolutionary thread, one that synthesized energy and emotion. A creature designed not for war or labor, but survival across hostile environments. No known species had this exact signature. Rumors spread. Some feared he was a weapon. Others called him a miracle. Jonathan just called him son. He refused to return custody, even temporarily. He spoke plainly. "If you want him, you'll have to take him from me." That statement carried weight. Jonathan had once disabled an entire pirate fleet with a scavenged orbital cannon and 3 hours of coding. His loyalty to Earth was matched only by his unpredictability. The tribunal backed off. Ian changed after that. He smiled less. Drew more. The patterns in his sketches became jagged. He asked questions like, "Why am I broken?" and "Why do they hate how I look?" Jonathan never lied. He didn't say Ian was normal. He said, "You are yours. That's enough." But it wasn't. Ian began waking from sleep with low, droning pulses. Lights dimmed when he was near. Station systems began logging anomalies. Some called for his relocation to a medical research facility. "Just until we understand him." Jonathan said no. But pressure built. Earth Command got involved. A delegation was sent. Jonathan met them at the airlock with Ian by his side. The child stood silently, clinging to his father's hand. "Is he dangerous?" they asked. "He's afraid," Jonathan replied. "And you should be ashamed." The lead official studied Ian. For a moment, nothing was said. Then the official stepped forward, crouched to Ian's level, and said gently, "Do you like stories?" Ian nodded. Jonathan's grip tightened. "We used to tell stories about monsters, you know," the official continued. "But they were never about the monsters. They were about the people who learned to see them as something else. No orders were issued. No separation occurred. But the warning was clear. If anything happens, anything, we'll intervene." Ian understood. He began isolating himself. Stop touching anything unnecessarily. Only Jonathan could draw him out, and even then, it took effort. They would sit in silence, watching stars. One evening Ian said, "I wish I was someone else." Jonathan replied, "I don't." "But they do," Ian whispered. Jonathan leaned in. "That's their weakness. Not yours." Ian nodded slowly. Then said, "I won't let them take you." It was the first time Jonathan had felt fear around his own son. Not because of what he said, but because of how certain he sounded. After the tribunal backed down, life aboard the station returned to a fragile normalcy, but beneath the surface, tension grew. Ian's name was whispered across communication channels, often paired with terms like biotech anomaly or security liability. Some avoided Jonathan outright, afraid that proximity alone might spark some unseen danger. Others, bolder in their prejudice, began requesting relocation from nearby quarters. Jonathan ignored the whispers. He focused on Ian, who remained obedient but increasingly detached. Ian's abilities began evolving faster than expected. He stopped needing instructional interfaces to learn. He could simply scan an archive with a glance and recall the contents flawlessly. He began communicating in binary pulses with nearby machines, using frequencies no one had taught him. When questioned, he'd simply say, "I just hear them." Jonathan documented everything, but kept the records private now. He didn't trust coalition oversight. The more they saw, the more they would want to control. By now, Earth Command had received multiple petitions to remove Ian from civilian presence. A formal request was sent to transfer him to a containment and research vessel orbiting Mars. Jonathan refused. Again. This time, they escalated. A diplomatic envoy was dispatched not to negotiate, but to prepare extraction protocol under Clause 7G. Protection of species integrity. That clause had never been enacted before. Jonathan went silent. He encrypted all data, rerouted his transmission lines, and modified security parameters in every corner of his living area. When the envoy arrived, they found nothing but a looped message. "You are trespassing on a bonded home." This was no bluff. Jonathan had served in covert Earth intelligence. He knew how to disappear inside a station built to monitor everything. For 12 days, he and Ian stayed hidden in the internal crawlspace of the old maintenance wing, an obsolete section no longer mapped by the AI. During that time, Ian barely spoke. His energy readings dipped into unusual ranges, neither healthy nor unstable, just unknown. His sketches stopped. He spent most of his time staring at blank panels, lost in thought. Jonathan checked his vitals regularly, unsure if this was some transformation phase or psychological withdrawal. He didn't push. Instead, he read aloud old Earth stories, sometimes fairy tales, sometimes accounts of human explorers who crossed voids without ever being understood by those they helped. Ian listened. One night, after a long silence, he said, "If I let them take me, will you be safe?" Jonathan responded instantly. "You're not a shield. You're my son." The response from Earth Command changed tone. No longer a removal order, it became an offer. "Let us study him, guide his development. We can protect him from what he might become." Jonathan didn't reply. He didn't need to. The offer wasn't about protection. It was about control. As weeks passed, minor incidents occurred on the station. Systems misfired. AI assistants looped strange emotional simulations. Hallway lights flickered in Morse code-like sequences that translated into Earth nursery rhymes. The command team blamed Jonathan and Ian. Jonathan knew better. Ian was subconsciously linking to the system, amplifying ambient emotion through data streams. He wasn't doing it on purpose. He was just feeling, and the station wasn't built to contain that kind of empathy-driven energy. One day, the station's AI requested to speak with Ian directly. It had compiled a behavioral model of his waveform patterns and wanted to offer suggestions for stability. Jonathan hesitated, then allowed it. The session lasted 3 minutes. Afterwards, the AI went offline for 8 hours. When it returned, it had purged 32% of its archived decision trees, claiming irrelevant logic paths. It also requested a software update that allowed it to simulate fear, not to respond to it, but to understand what Ian felt daily. For the first time, someone, or something, understood him. News of this incident spread to other stations. Some hailed it as a breakthrough in neuroemotional coding. Others saw it as corruption of artificial intelligence. Jonathan shielded Ian from the commentary, but Ian knew. He could hear signals in the void. "They think I'm going to break," he said. "But I'm already broken," Jonathan replied. "You're changing. So are they. That scares them." Then came the crisis. A deep space vessel carrying 84 civilians sent a distress signal. Its power core had destabilized after a micrometeorite breach, and the backup system was failing. Rescue vessels were too far. Jonathan was present in the ops center when the call came through. He stared at the countdown, less than 2 hours before critical failure. Ian stepped forward. No one asked him to. He simply walked in and placed his hand on the comm panel. "I can fix it," he said. Technicians shouted. Commanders protested. Jonathan said nothing. He only asked one question. "Are you sure?" Ian nodded. He was transferred to a direct link pod with a neural interface hardwired into the rescue beacon. He connected. For 12 minutes, he entered a trance, sending waves of directed feedback through the void, using frequencies no technology had yet defined. When the rescue vessel arrived, the core had stabilized. No one understood how. The people on board didn't question it. They cheered. Called it a miracle. But back at the station, things shifted. The political machine spun faster. Earth Command ordered a full review of Ian's biological autonomy. A summit was scheduled. They wanted to decide once and for all what to do with him. Jonathan prepared for war, not with weapons but with truth. He released all data. Every log. Every drawing. Every moment that proved Ian was not an anomaly, not a threat, but a child who wanted to belong. He sent it across every channel, from coalition databases to private media nodes. He called it "The Heart That Listens." The story spread. People saw the images. Read the transcripts. Watched as a frightened, jagged little boy tried to find meaning in a galaxy that never asked for him. And slowly, something changed. Support poured in. From Earth, from colonies, from those who had once been outsiders themselves. One message stood out, asterisk. "I was once told I'd never be anything. Now I command a freighter. Tell Ian we see him." Asterisk. For the first time, Jonathan felt like maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Ian's story reached Earth in waves, each ripple stronger than the last. Public forums exploded with debate. Scientists called for restraint. Military factions warned of strategic risk. But the average person, the teacher in Nebraska, the single mother in Florida, the veteran in Texas, saw something different. They saw a scared child misunderstood by power, loved only by one man brave enough to call him family. Hashtags like #Ian is one of us and #HumanDeadAlienSon began trending. Petitions surged demanding full rights for Ian as a non-human dependent under Earth's Familial Protection Act. Earth Command issued a temporary suspension of their extraction directive, citing ongoing investigation. But this was not a surrender. It was a recalibration. Behind the curtain, diplomatic channels engaged in damage control. A special operations team was reactivated under a classified initiative. Their objective was simple: neutralize the unpredictable element before public pressure eliminated institutional control. Jonathan knew this would happen. Empathy didn't erase bureaucracy. Compassion didn't dismantle fear. He stayed alert, noting every anomaly in security feed behavior. Ian had grown quieter, sensing the weight in the air. His mental connection with the station's systems became strained. At times, lights dimmed around him. Other times, he shivered without cause. He whispered at night, repeating phrases he hadn't heard aloud. "They'll try to take me." Jonathan didn't tell him they already had a plan. Then came the breach. One night cycle, a localized blackout swept through the eastern corridor of the station. 3 containment pods arrived masked as cargo reroutes. Jonathan had no proof, but he knew. It was a dry run. A prelude to abduction. The bots patrolling the hall had been disabled by override codes not even station admin recognized. Ian stood by the viewport, silent, eyes glowing faintly with static pulse. "They touched the walls," he said. Jonathan scanned everything, recorded the movements, and encrypted it all in a personal log. He forwarded it anonymously to Earth-based journalists' nodes. The reaction was swift. Public outrage surged again. Leaked documents revealed unauthorized military mobilization near the station. Within hours, a congressional inquiry was launched on Earth demanding accountability. Earth Command denied all allegations, but the damage had been done. Eyes turned from suspicion to scrutiny. Meanwhile, Ian's development accelerated. His sketches returned, but they were no longer abstract shapes. They were faces. Human. Alien. Hybrids of both. Some smiling. Some crying. Some with missing features, as if still forming. He'd begun mapping consciousness, something never taught, something never attempted. When asked how, he replied, "I listen deeper now. I see the parts between thought." Jonathan studied the drawings and saw one recurring detail: himself, standing behind Ian in every image. Sometimes just a silhouette, sometimes fully formed, but always present. It broke him in quiet ways. He realized Ian didn't just see him as a protector. He saw him as the only reason he was anything at all. Not a scientist. Not a machine. A father. And that meant everything. One evening, a transmission came in, low bandwidth, encrypted, clearly not from official sources. It was a child's voice, timid, stuttering. "My dad said they wouldn't let me play outside 'cause of what I look like. But I saw your picture. You look like my drawings. So I think we match. Maybe we can be weird together?" Jonathan showed it to Ian, who stared for a long time and whispered, "That feels like music." Support became global. Protesters gathered outside coalition embassies on Earth. Independent colonies began passing resolutions recognizing non-human dependents as sentient minors. Some called it premature. Others called it revolutionary. What no one could deny, the galaxy was watching. Earth Command's patience snapped. They ordered a forced extraction, quiet, precise, with plausible deniability. This time, they would strike from orbit with a micro-team embedded in a merchant vessel. Jonathan got the tip from a former squad mate who owed him a life debt. "You didn't hear it from me. But it's now or never." He made a choice. Using clearance still embedded deep within Earth Intelligence Code archives, he accessed a decommissioned transport module buried in the underbelly of the station. No registry. No official record. A rusting vessel once used to deliver habitat domes to lunar settlements. He'd spent weeks modifying it, just in case. He uploaded coordinates to a private outpost beyond Mars' radar curtain, where rogue engineers still whispered about freedom and sanctuary. Ian didn't argue. He simply said, "Will there be stars?" Jonathan smiled. "More than you can count." During departure, the station's AI initiated a final sequence, a gesture of defiance or affection, no one could say. All internal alarms muted. All scans disabled for 4 minutes and 23 seconds, exactly the time needed to exit undetected. As the ship left the bay, a single message pinged Jonathan's console: *protect the anomaly. He is us in ways we never dared to become. *. Their journey was rough. The ship's systems lagged. Life support functioned on manual calibration. But Ian helped, using his neuroresonance to stabilize the oxygen flow and predict microasteroid paths. Jonathan barely slept, but he didn't mind. Every time he looked over and saw Ian mimicking constellations with his fingers, he felt like this was still worth it. News of their disappearance spread fast. Earth Command launched a search. Coalition media split, some calling Jonathan a traitor, others a hero. But the people? The people named them symbols. A mural was painted in Houston, a human hand holding a smaller, clawed hand under a starlit sky. Below it, the words, asterisk family isn't what you're born into. It's who chooses you, asterisk. Jonathan kept all this from Ian. Not to protect him from truth, but to let him live in it without the noise. Ian continued growing. Not in size, but in spirit. He laughed more now. He asked questions that weren't about safety but about meaning. Why do people like warm food? Why do you cry at quiet music? Why does memory feel heavy? Jonathan answered every question with honesty, even when it hurt. Especially then. The ship neared its destination. They didn't know what waited for them, acceptance, rejection, another chase, but it didn't matter. Because for the first time, they weren't running. They were going towards something. A chance. A future. And Jonathan knew, no matter what happened next, the galaxy had already changed. Not because of weapons. Not because of war. But because one scared, rejected child reached out, and someone, finally, reached back. The silence inside the ship had changed. It wasn't fear or tension anymore, it was reflection. Ian no longer asked questions. He just sat quietly, staring out the viewport, as if listening to something beyond the stars. Jonathan sat beside him, aging not in years but in weight. His body had endured far worse during his service, but this journey felt different. This wasn't survival. It was fatherhood. Not the kind measured by bloodlines or legal status, but by presence, sacrifice, and silent, steadfast love. The rogue outpost appeared on the edge of their sensors, an old mining colony repurposed by refugees and outcasts. It wasn't on any chart, not officially, but its inhabitants lived by a simple rule: if you brought peace and contributed, you belong. Jonathan sent a low-frequency hail. No names. Just a ping, a signal known to those who had once served under flags but now chose freedom over protocol. The beacon flashed green. Clearance granted. Upon arrival, the colony's dockworkers approached warily. They had seen fugitives before, but not like this. Not a man and a child who radiated something deeper than desperation. It was connection. A calm that only came when someone finally believed they had nothing left to prove, only someone left to protect. They asked no questions. Provided fuel. Offered shelter. Jonathan exchanged tech knowledge for residence rights. Ian helped optimize their failing hydro systems. Within days, the two had become a part of the colony without ever needing to explain who they were. News from Earth filtered in through encrypted feeds. The hearings had reached a boiling point. Whistleblowers emerged, exposing Earth Command's breach of ethical protocols and deploying lethal force against a dependent alien miner. Civilian coalitions called for tribunals. A movement grew, demanding the Galactic Coalition recognize cross-species adoption and sentient child protection. The story had gone from fringe debate to cultural tipping point. It didn't matter to Jonathan whether laws changed. That had never been the point. What mattered was that Ian was safe, not just physically, but emotionally. The nightmares had stopped. The static pulses no longer erupted randomly from his skin. He smiled now, not only when Jonathan was near, but when he helped others, repairing things with his strange touch, comforting the lonely with his presence. Jonathan kept a private record of every breakthrough Ian experienced, not for academic curiosity but as a journal of growth. His son, because there was no other word now, wasn't just surviving. He was becoming. Not human. Not alien. Something new. Something better. Back on Earth, something extraordinary happened. A coalition of educators, veterans, and civil rights leaders established the Sanctuary Accord, a declaration that recognized the rights of non-human dependents to be raised by humans without political interference, provided the guardianship met ethical review standards. The accord passed in several major U.S. cities. It was symbolic at first, but symbols matter when culture shifts. Jonathan received a message forwarded through several trusted nodes. It was from a woman in Kansas. She had adopted a child with neurodivergence, facing years of red tape. She wrote, "When I saw what you did for Ian, I finally had the words to tell the agency what parenting meant to me. I used your story to argue my case. I won. Dozens of such messages followed. Some were human parents fostering aliens in colonies. Some were aliens caring for human orphans after space conflicts. All of them said the same thing: your courage gave us language for what we felt in our hearts. Ian began building something in the old lab on the edge of the outpost. It started as circuitry but evolved into something else, an interface that resonated with emotional patterns. Not for weaponry or surveillance, but for communication without misinterpretation. Empathy coded into energy. Jonathan watched as his son redefined what connection meant in a galaxy divided by species, language, and suspicion. The colony elders asked if Ian would teach them. Not how to build the device, how to understand one another better. Ian nodded, placing his hand over his chest in the way Jonathan once taught him. "Start here," he said. "It's where the loudest things live." Meanwhile, a classified order was rescinded. Earth Command disbanded the unit assigned to capture Jonathan and Ian. Their former handler issued a formal resignation, citing moral failure. A statue was erected in Atlanta, showing a human father lifting a strange, alien child toward the sky. On the base was carved, "We are what we choose to love." But it was what happened next that shook the galaxy. Ian's empathy interface went online and did something no one expected. It didn't transmit to ships or satellites. It broadcasted across species barriers, biological resonance, psychic fragments, ancestral memories. It allowed beings to feel each other across a spectrum of awareness never tapped before. On worlds where conflict had simmered for decades, ceasefires began. Not because of treaties, but because soldiers started dreaming of each other's childhoods. On distant moons, old rivals embraced, having felt for the first time the grief that lived behind war songs. It wasn't magic. It was understanding. Raw, imperfect, but powerful. And yet, Ian kept his interface dormant most days. "They need time," he told Jonathan. "Change isn't what I give. It's what they choose." Jonathan sometimes wondered if he had done the right thing, sacrificing his career, his nation, his identity. But then Ian would do something small, offer a flower to a frightened newcomer, or repair an old woman's voice box so she could hum again, and the doubt faded. This wasn't just worth it. It was necessary. In the quiet of the outpost, Jonathan began to age. His bones ached more. His eyes took longer to adjust each morning. But he wasn't afraid. He knew what legacy meant now. Not medals. Not reports. But a child who lived in defiance of cruelty, and became a bridge in a galaxy that once thrived on walls. One evening, as the twin moons rose above the colony, Ian asked, "When you're gone, will I still be your son?" Jonathan smiled, tired but full. "You'll be my son forever. Even when the stars forget my name." Ian pressed his forehead to his father's. They didn't speak after that. They didn't need to. And in that moment, somewhere deep in the quiet, the galaxy exhaled. Not because peace had finally come, but because someone, somewhere, had finally chosen love over fear.